On this edition of The Best Times, we examine the progress of the Plough Foundation's Aging Initiative. We focus on the troubling issue of senior suicide, and we'll report on the good and bad of cholesterol. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plough Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you. Hello, I'm Chris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. In 2014, the Plough Foundation focused its attention on issues affecting our aging population in Memphis and Shelby County, seeking grant proposals from organizations that could address these issues. One of their major areas of focus was elder abuse. The Plough grant has enabled the creation of a coordinated response team with the police, prosecutors, and social service agencies working together to stop elder abuse. The foundation also focused on aging in place initiatives designed to keep our older citizens in their homes for as long as possible. The Plough grants are producing aging in place specialists and helping qualifying citizens modify their homes to meet their aging needs. Through the No Hungry Senior Project, the Plough Foundation's grantees are identifying seniors who are food insecure and delivering them life-sustaining meals. In total, the Plough Foundation has awarded over $12 million in grants to nonprofit organizations, including WKNO and this program. Tonight, we update the progress of the Aging Initiative. Before we begin to talk about the current update and find out where the progress stands on the Aging Initiative, I want to go back a few years to the 11-12 period when Plough made the decision to focus on aging. Why did they make that decision?
And we have a criteria that we go through when we're selecting a grant. And one of the criteria that we try to evaluate is leveraging resources, other resources, partnerships in the community, and the impact it has. The board decided, let's focus on some senior initiatives. And so the next question, if you will, was what services should we address? So it was a combination, initially intuitive, followed up by a comprehensive study, and then narrowing it down to 3 issues that we felt like would have the board felt would have the greatest impact on the community.
Well, let's talk about the progress on those 3 issues. Let's begin with elder abuse, because that affects somewhere between 1 and 2 million seniors nationwide, and it's largely an invisible crime. Only about 1 out of every 23 cases is actually reported. Well, now this is the second year of the grant period for CREA. How do you feel it is working so far?
This past year, the legislature passed a law statewide that puts the prosecutor, the district attorney general, in charge of a team, and this is in every county across the state, that would guarantee a CREA-like cooperation in every county. And so we hope that the efforts that were made at CREA, which helped create this law and require this kind of cooperation, will institutionalize this effort.
Let's shift over to aging in place. Again, you formed a partnership. Habitat for Humanity is one of the leads on that, but it's a number of organizations that have come together. How do you feel the progress has been made with that?
We were able to, in this pilot initiative, bring about 350 homes that we hope to bring up to some safe level. Now, we're not putting in new kitchens. We're taking care of structural issues and safety issues to make sure that the house is strong, it's structurally strong, there's not going to be an additional deterioration of the house. And in addition to that, it's safe for that senior to move around in it, okay? So that's our focus, and that's what we've been doing. And we're up to about 175 homes that we've been able to address. Habitat has received tremendous publicity over this initiative. They do a fantastic job on in this initiative, and of course President Carter's been in town, and it got some publicity in that respect too. And so I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but there are still a lot of homes that need work, and that's going to cause for a lot more. And we can talk later. I know we're going to talk about sustainability later.
Now, the third one is the No Hungry Senior Project, which deals with food insecurity among seniors. And there are an astounding number of seniors at risk just in Memphis and Shelby County.
Yeah, right.
Again, a number of agencies, you brought them together to attack this as partnership that you spoke about. What about the progress on that up to this point?
Good progress. Well over. We're approaching 1,200 now that are receiving daily meals, which I know is still a long way to go, but we feel comfortable that progress is making. We had on all of these initiatives, so there was a little bit of snowstorm, the learning process, if you will, to get started. But now all three initiatives are moving on a good pace and addressing, and getting, reaching out and reaching and helping more and more seniors. The word is getting out about the work that the Plow Foundation has done, and I think it's catching the attention of other funders as well.
Well, let's talk about sustainability, because a part of all of these grants was a sustainability element when the grant period ends. So talk about sustainability going forward, especially on these three programs.
Yeah. They're all different. I think with CREA, the fact that the state has stepped up, recognition, no funding yet, but recognition that there needs to be this team working together, this coordinated team working together to address elder abuse. That's a good first step, Aging in Place. Again, they've received grants, they've sought and received other grants, we've pushed them for other grants. Fact of the matter is that I think we can hopefully go towards our banking community and say, okay, here's some people who qualify for loans. So what they need is just someone to help them kind of walk them through the process, make sure they have the right person that's providing that service. So No Hungry Senior is incredibly important. So there's a hope that there will be some philanthropic or charitable fundraising through churches or so forth to do that. So there's a little hope, a glimmer of hope, that there may be, just like Aging in Place, the recognition that if you make these investments early, it'll pay great dividends in the future.
Well, let's talk about that future. Obviously, with these three initiatives, you've been able to make a dent, but the problem, of course, is much bigger. What does the Plow Foundation envision for the future of the senior population in Memphis and Shelby County?
There's going to be greater needs. We have a poor population. They're going to put a strain on our hospitals. They're going to put a strain on TennCare, as I've stated. We are going to, I can't say that the Board of Trustees will continue to provide the massive funding that we did with these initiatives. But we will stay engaged, and we have worked with all these agencies to try to find funding sources, other funding sources for them. I think ultimately, not with all these, that with some of these, local and state government's going to have to step forward and provide some funding of some sort. I think it behooves all our elected officials to look at these needs and to make sure that these needs are being met, because again, it's only going to get worse as as this mass number of baby boomers including me and you, get older. So I think it's incumbent upon our elected officials to at least take a look at that. We're going to have conversations with them about that. So we're encouraged. I mean, we are encouraged. We think the light has gone on, at least. It's a start. And we think in the next 3 to 5 years, there'll be more folks and more government involvement in this area, and more, we hope more philanthropic involvement in this area and charitable giving. If we can just get everybody coordinated in a way that's effective and efficient, I think that's the key.
Well, thank you very much for being on The Best Times and talking about and updating us on the Aging Initiative.
Yes, and thanks for all what you do as well in
You're welcome.
this initiative.
You may be surprised to learn that suicide is one of the 10 leading causes of death in this country. The Centers for Disease Control reports that during the period from 1999 to 2014, the suicide rate increased by 24%, and the rate was highest in the 45 to 64 age group. Why has our suicide rate soared to a 30-year high, and why are older Americans at such a high risk of senior suicide? Older adults only make up about 12% of the American population, yet they represent about 18% of suicides. Why?
Factors involve things like social isolation, people not necessarily socially connected, often less active. We also will see people having financial difficulties, seniors having financial difficulties. And the other piece that comes into play often along with the social and the financial issues are health issues. You know, there's often, there may be chronic conditions and things like this, you know, so that loss of that. And you know, it sounds strange. I would even throw in Dr. Hill, you may agree with me, loss of self in some sense, because oftentimes, you know, especially for males who this really impacts heavily, retirement often involves a loss of a sense of self because often our identities are tied up in work.
Yeah, and that gets to some statistics from the CDC, the fact that the 45 to 64 age group had the highest rate of increase in suicides. Why that particular group, and especially, as you point out, why men?
The loss of status or the problems that happen with finances in that category of people, and unfortunately, there are people that do suffer with persistent problems that are emotional, and if those problems don't get into remission, that increases the likelihood that they might end their life in suicide. We know that addiction and addictive illnesses increase the likelihood that someone may engage in suicidal behavior.
Mike, are you seeing these same kind of numbers at the crisis center in your calls?
Yes, we actually, I'd say probably about a quarter of the calls that we're getting are coming from seniors or involve senior issues. And I want to concur too with what Dr. Hill just said, because often there's underlying mental health issues that these economic issues and these other stressors can exacerbate. So there may be a situational issue, but oftentimes there may be either a diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issue going on as well.
Are there warning signs that caregivers can identify and say this person might be at risk? Are there warning signs?
Yes. I would say that any emotional symptom could raise the likelihood that someone might make that decision to end their life in suicide, whether it's insomnia, whether it's anxiety, whether it's sadness, grief, a sense of loss, a sense of loss of purpose, identity, disconnection from other people. So my specialty, we have family and caregivers look for symptoms that may need further evaluation by the caregiver, just to ask them, are you having a thought about doing harm to yourself? That's not an inappropriate question to ask.
What we really find out, and this is particularly true, I think, with elders, is that we can overcome the stigma, we can overcome the taboo for the person by asking them directly, not beating around the bush, and asking in a positive as opposed to a negative way. You aren't, asking, are you thinking about suicide, as opposed to, you're not thinking about suicide, are you? Because we want to encourage them to be honest with us.
Are there risk factors? Are there certain things that put certain people at risk of suicide, especially in this older age group?
I think that when we talked about loss earlier, I think that a range of different losses,
Loss
as
of
we
a
talked
spouse.
about, like loss of a spouse, we said particularly with males. And again, those can be losses that are associated with health as well. So.
Right. The diagnoses that might be a serious medical condition or a chronic medical condition or a condition that causes someone to lose their function, change in vision, hearing, ambulation, those things can add to that sense of hopelessness or worthlessness, and the person starts thinking that suicide might be an appropriate answer.
Can we do a better job as a society in our various organizations of identifying people who are at risk? I'm speaking here in terms of, let's say, senior centers, let's say physicians, primary care physicians. Can those individuals and more perform a better role, or what role can they perform in helping to identify someone at risk and bring it to light?
Well, I can speak from the medical community. We know that patients, many of them frequently see a doctor soon before their suicide. And physicians now are being trained in screening tools to look for depressive symptoms or thoughts about suicide. And yes, we can do better in terms of the medical community to recognize that when someone gets diagnosed with a serious illness or a chronic illness, that puts them at a higher risk, and they need these screening questions asked directly to them.
Final question about advice for someone who may be experiencing some of these thoughts. What's your best advice?
You know, my best advice is reach out to somebody for help. Don't be afraid. I realize there is a stigma attached, and nobody is telling you at this point you have to take suicide off the table if you're thinking about it. But if you can postpone it, you know, if you can push it back and reach out for help, there are a number of different places that you can get help, obviously. Your life is at least worth a phone call. And you can pick up the phone and you call 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALK. The people there will be able to link them with the long-term resources that they're going to need to cope and overcome. But I would say don't be afraid to reach out for help. And I would also say to those who are caregivers or our loved ones or our family members of elders to if you think something along this line is going on, don't be afraid to ask. Be very direct, ask directly, ask caringly, but ask directly, and let the person know that it's okay for them to open up and share that.
And I would say that whenever someone is planning suicide, that may be a medical emergency at that point. So the patient, the potential patient, may need to go to a certain place that's a safe environment for them. And that may lead to a hospitalization and may lead to an outpatient referral. We know that people that die by suicide, they're not crazy. Frequently they need therapy, they need support, they need practical solutions. Not everybody needs to be in a psychiatric hospital, but everybody needs to talk it out. Everybody needs to be safe if they're planning something dangerous.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for being on The Best Times and talking about senior suicide.
Thank you.
If you are having suicidal thoughts and want to talk to someone, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or the Memphis Crisis Center. Both lifelines are open 24/7, including holidays. About a third of Americans, that's 71 million people, have high cholesterol levels that could affect their health. The CDC reports that only about half of that number actually get treatment. High cholesterol has no symptoms, and like high blood pressure, it's often referred to as a silent killer. Let's examine the good and bad of cholesterol. What is cholesterol?
So cholesterol is a compound, a chemical compound, that's in all the cell membranes and it's very important for body function. It's what in the yolk of an egg makes an egg yolk yellow. So in and of itself, it's actually a very important part of our body's function. And of course, as everyone knows, the problem comes in that in Western society, we have too much cholesterol and it gets into the bloodstream and then causes all kinds of problems with heart disease and stroke.
What is the difference between HDL and LDL cholesterol?
And I think that's very important for people to understand, because when you measure a total cholesterol, that's actually the sum of several different fractions, some good and some bad. The low-density cholesterol, or LDL cholesterol that people refer to, is a form of cholesterol that's in a particle that's floating in the bloodstream, and that has the function of taking blood fat out to the different tissues where they can use it, and cholesterol to where they can use it. And that form of cholesterol, the cholesterol that's in that LDL particle, if there's too much of it in your bloodstream, it will get into your arteries and cause a buildup of a plaque, atherosclerotic plaque, which eventually can lead to a heart attack or a stroke. Then, on the other hand, you have cholesterol that's in the HDL particle, or high density particle, and that's protective. And so the more of that you have, the better off you are, because it actually goes into the artery and pulls out the bad cholesterol and takes it, gets rid of it.
Who is at risk?
If you eat a lot of saturated fat, and particularly like red meat, things like that, butter, sources of fat, then that makes your bad cholesterol go up. Lack of exercise is another thing. The more you exercise and keep your weight, weight in a good range, that keeps the cholesterol down as well. And then the other factor, and unfortunately this is something we can't do anything about, is who you pick to be your parents, and it's genes.
Is age a factor?
Unfortunately, again, as we get older, cholesterol tends to go up. By lifestyle modification, by diet, and by regular exercise, you can actually reverse some of those age-related changes in cholesterol. You can get the good cholesterol back up and bring the bad cholesterol down.
What diseases are caused by high cholesterol?
If you have high cholesterol, particularly over a long period of time, then what happens is that the cholesterol accumulates in your arteries and creates what we call an atherosclerotic plaque. And that just simply is a collection of cholesterol or deposit in the artery that then grows and grows. And if it gets far enough along or big enough, it'll completely block that artery. And then what happens is blood flow to the tissues or to the organs supplied by that artery is cut off, and the tissues die. In the case of a heart artery, you get a heart attack or myocardial infarction. If the blockage is in the arteries leading to the brain, you'll get a stroke. And then if the blockage is in the arteries leading to your legs, you have what's called peripheral vascular disease, or what happened there is you'll notice that when you walk more than a block or so, your legs will start cramping and hurting because they're not getting enough blood.
What treatment is available?
When we're treating patients with high cholesterol, we always start with diet. What's in your diet? Are you eating a healthy diet? Because that's the first step. The second step is exercise, regular exercise, and we recommend at least 45 minutes a day, 3 or 4 days a week. And those really are the cornerstone. And for many patients, that's actually enough. But if your cholesterol still remains in a range that puts you at risk after you've done that, then that's the point at which we consider starting statin therapy. And they're highly effective at removing cholesterol from the bloodstream. They'll lower your bad cholesterol level by up to 50 or 60%.
Do your cholesterol levels put you at risk of cardiovascular disease. You can find out with the Risk Estimator on the website of the American College of Cardiology. Want more information about life after 50? Go online to watch more shows and find more resources. And send us your feedback and story ideas to besttimes@wkno.org. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. Please join us next week for more stories about life after 50. Until then, I'm Chris Hardaway. Thanks for watching. Good night. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plough Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you.